everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's panel session. Our topic today is Gen Z and generosity, acquiring and retaining young donors, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation and just jumping in and getting started. But before we do, I have a few quick logistics to cover. NXUnite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, and the NXUnite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video, on NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks here with me today. I do also want to give a quick thank you to our sponsor of today's session, Double the Donation. Double the Donation is the leading provider of corporate employee matching gift tools, and through the use of their matching gift software, nonprofits, schools, and universities significantly boost their matching gift and volunteer grant revenue. Double the Donation is known for having the world's most comprehensive database of more than 20,000 companies and subsidiaries that offer matching gift programs. Thank you so much to Double the Donation for supporting the NXUnite mission. All right, today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. So at any time during the panel session, please feel free to start submitting your questions via the questions tab. You can drop them directly in the chat. They're just a little bit more likely to get lost, so the questions tab is a little bit safer of an option. But again, start submitting them now, and then we'll address as many as we possibly can in our second half of the panel. If at any point you are having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, please let us know in the chat. My colleague Malou is under the Team NXUnite username and will do her best to assist. So give a little holler in the chat, let us know what's happening, and we'll try to figure out how to get you back on and enjoying the session as quickly as possible. I did also want to say that this panel session is being recorded. I saw that was a question in the chat, so happy to address that now. This session is being recorded and will automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the hour. So give it a few minutes after we wrap up and that recording will be there. It will also continue to be accessible on the NXUnite website in the on-demand panel section. So if you have any friends in the industry who are like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that session was perfect for them, please feel free to share that same registration page that you used to sign up, and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I do want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you are joining us live and letting us know in the chat where you're calling in from, or you're watching the recording tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Hope you enjoy this session, hope you learned something, and also hope that if you are joining live, you will submit those questions so that we can address the topics relevant to you and your team. All right, to begin with the introductions, I'd first like to introduce Mackenzie Burke-Buckler, who's the Partnership Success Specialist at Double the Donation, the leading provider of matching gift automation software. With a Master of Marketing degree, she understands the importance of nailing messaging and creating cohesive campaigns that resonate with audiences. Through her role, Mackenzie works with fundraising technology companies to help nonprofits and educational institutions leverage the power of corporate matching gifts. So great to have you on another panel, Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I'm excited for this discussion.
As am I. Also here with us today is Alyssa Boger, who serves as the Senior Vice President of Client Strategy at Pursuant, a comprehensive nonprofit fundraising agency. Through her experience working with organizations of varying size and mission impact, she supports the creation of successful, comprehensive fundraising solutions across the donor pyramid. Alyssa's client relationships are strengthened by her passion for data-informed strategies that inspire new and measured thinking. Alyssa's expertise lies in omni-channel fundraising, data analysis and insights, comprehensive direct response strategy and execution, and program transitions to relationship fundraising. Alyssa, so glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, here with us today is Parker Golson, who is a senior project manager at Pursuant with a strong 6 years of agency experience under his belt. Since starting his career, Parker has run the gamut of the marketing game, from process optimization to crafting full-fledged strategies. With deep exposure to cross-media marketing and a passion for powering client relations, he works to continuously sharpen agency-wide operations and shuttle forward constituent-first fundraising efforts. Glad to have you, Parker.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it is time for us to finally jump in and get started. And Mackenzie, I'm going to have you start us off with our first question. Are Gen Z donors different than other generations of donors? And what do nonprofits need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big question, right? And I think the first thing that we hear about often about this generation is that above all else, they kind of value this authenticity and transparency. And yes, I know other generations value this as well, but I think there's kind of like a hyper focus on that authenticity and transparency from this generation, primarily because I think they know they have the tools and ability to actually kind of hold you accountable for this, kind of their digital connectivity, their ability to analyze and synthesize, unpack data really allows them to kind of fact check what you're saying, make sure that their donations really are being put to good use and will ultimately kind of create a better world and create a better outcome. And I think that bigger picture piece and why your work matters is really key. They want to know what you're working towards, but also how that work will impact the broader communities that they're part of. So I think that's really important. I also think we know it's true that they're giving in some less traditional ways, right? They often give to grassroots movements like a friend's GoFundMe. They give that way as well, rather than just giving directly to an established charity. And so I think that the reason for that is that they're willing to give to causes that they care about and have a lot of trust in. They give because they feel it's like the right thing to do rather than, just giving to a specific organization because, that's kind of how that traditional way had gone. So I think we need to consider that. We want to kind of embrace these non-traditional ways of donating so that we're able to get in front of the curve and get in front of these donors. And then the last little thing that I'll note here is kind of their interest in advocacy is really important to know as well. They're increasingly kind of open about their beliefs and values, want to spread the word about causes that they care about. And so because of that, I think being able to leverage that word of mouth and their penchant for advocacy will be important as we kind of move forward to connect with these donors.
Fantastic. Really appreciate you starting us off there, Mackenzie. Alyssa, I'm going to bring this same question over to you. Are Gen Z donors different than other generations, and what do we need to keep in mind?
Yeah. Everything Mackenzie just shared. I think also diversity is a key element. They're the most diverse generation. I think they're on track to be the first majority non-white generation by 2026. And so it's a very, very unique, diverse generation that has just a completely different, I think, worldview connection than other generations before it. They're digital natives. And so just that community that they've built that hasn't been restricted by geography or just by, who might live on their street or go to their school or be at their workplace. There's connections and I think an affinity for Gen Z that's more global than maybe previous generations. And so as nonprofits are thinking about their fundraising strategy, I think an element of just how they're approaching diversity, equity, inclusion, the way that they speak up for different topics or current events are seen by Gen Z in much different ways than other generations. I think they're kind of expecting the causes that they're loyal to and that they're passionate about to take a stand and to stand for something. And so I think that's probably that, and just diversity. It's a very different connection that they have to the brands that they're loyal to, and the ways that the brands and nonprofits need to be speaking to them, keeping those elements in mind.
Great. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Yeah.
All right, Parker, I want to hear from you on this as well. How do you see Gen Z donors as different?
Yeah, I think this group of individuals has come to age in a world of identity politics and like very publicized cultural and civil movements, leading to a generation very full of strong opinions and beliefs, very passionate. I think this cohort of individuals, like, they don't have thousands of dollars to give just yet, right? But they do care very much so. Similarly to what Mackenzie said, they are, I'll use the term, chronically online, right? This has given them the ability to acquire any information that they might need very quickly, with the ease of both social media and the internet. So there is that desire to there's that bit of skepticism around certain causes, but there's also that desire to cut through the fluff and like, what are my dollars going to do? What is this movement really about? And who are the people behind the face of this body or this nonprofit that I'm giving to?
Great. Thank you so much, Parker. All right, very quickly, I want to let our audience know that we do have had a poll go live. I know some of you have already found it, but we've asked you what is currently the biggest challenge for your nonprofit when it comes to connecting with Gen Z. Right now, the top answers are difficulty in reaching Gen Z donors through traditional channels, lack of understanding of what motivates Gen Z donors, and lack of understanding, competition with other causes and priorities for Gen Z donors, but there are tons of other options, and I see people are voting right now, so I'll come back to that and see where we land after a few minutes. Alyssa, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What are the key factors to consider when creating a fundraising strategy that specifically targets our Gen Z donors?
I think, as Parker was talking about, that cutting through the fluff, Mackenzie mentioned also that authenticity and transparency is really important. And so knowing who you are as an organization, being true to your mission. I think in the nonprofit space, sometimes we can look at these aspirational nonprofits like, oh, I want to be just like that organization, or, oh my gosh, this organization over here is doing it so great. How can I copy that or emulate that? And I think Gen Z is looking for what makes you unique. We talk about what's your unique value proposition at Pursuant when we're engaging with other organizations. And I think that element's really important for a nonprofit. Like, what does make you unique, set apart? There's obviously strategies that you can take from nonprofits that are successful and doing things really well, but how do you tell your story in a way that is genuine and authentic? It doesn't have to be highly produced videos. It can be, really scaled back, raw, user-generated content or creative. I think also thinking about, as you're developing your brand story and sharing who you are as a mission, what is that kind of like vibe that you're cultivating as a nonprofit? And so when you think about your social, like what's the consistency and continuity that you're curating in the posts that you're sharing or the stories that you're developing? I think that story is really what is captivating and motivating to Gen Z, feeling like they can be part of that story in a way that's moving and impactful and genuine.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Parker, over to you. Any thoughts on what we should be particularly thinking about when we're trying to design a fundraising strategy for our Gen Z donors?
Yeah, I think you really have to think about the ease of having someone make that donation and the accessibility of making that donation. However, there's a fine line there between like the ease of making that donation and depersonalization. So just the other day, I was at the store and I was checking out, and at the point of sale on the keypad, it asked me if I wanted to add an extra $3 or $5 onto my tab to donate to some fundraising campaign kind of centered around the day. That, as a potential donor, that gives me no information on the cause, and it kind of comes off sort of as an afterthought, and someone who I will never see is just asking me for more money. Though it would have been really easy for me to make that donation, right? So there's a fine line there between making it super depersonalized, not letting it get super depersonalized, but also accessibility. But I think we have to think of things like, are your donation forms mobile friendly? Thinking of the UX. A majority of Gen Z potential donors are not sitting at a desktop when they're doing things outside of work, right? They're on their cell phones. Are potential donors able to swipe up from a social media post or land on a landing page that feels very clean and responsive? So I think even things like that in the accessibility realm, we have to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Parker. All right, Mackenzie, I think you know what question is coming your way. What key factors do we need to consider when developing a fundraising strategy for Gen Z?
Yeah, first I'd just echo kind of what Parker said. If it's not quick and easy to give, this generation might abandon that process altogether. And so they want to be able to text to give. They expect your donation form, like you said, to be mobile optimized. They expect there to be I like to say like little friction in the online donation process or any kind of associated asks that you're making of them. Like I think about at my company, we talk about asking donors to give their matching gift requests. If you're going to ask them to do that, you got to make it simple and easy for the donor to do it. And so this generation really values that kind of reduced friction and making sure that it's, a simple process for them, no matter what you're asking them to do. I think the other thing, though, that we kind of mentioned, and Alyssa touched on this a little bit before too, is that when it comes to targeting these donors, I think it's crucial that your fundraising strategy include that social approach. Obviously, we know that social media is kind of increasingly becoming the point of search for these donors. So what I mean by that is like maybe instead of going to Google to type in your name and go to your website and learn more about you, they might like go to social media first, and maybe they look up your organization directly, or they look up hashtags related to your mission and then stumble upon your page, or they find you because one of their friends shared your posts, right? Whatever the scenario is, I think having that social media presence where you share your story, as we talked about before, but that you also interact with donors online and respond to their questions and engage with them in like this two-way conversation is really important. That's kind of what this generation is used to, is being able to reach out to brands online. You can think of any number of for-profit businesses that are really active with this generation online. And so being able to kind of mimic that experience, I think can help you kind of build that relationship. And then the last thing that I would say is kind of as you're thinking of your fundraising strategy, don't underestimate the power of like micro philanthropy or micro donations from these donors right now. They're often like really eager to give smaller donations, but on that more frequent basis. And I think that's partly because of that subscription economy where we're in, where they're used to subscribe to Netflix, Spotify, Apple Music, anything of that nature. So if they're already used to that type of subscription, those small monthly kind of charges, doing something like that where they can have a subscription be to a cause that they care about, where they're the hero in this story, making you able to reach more beneficiaries, that could be really powerful. And so I think embracing that micro philanthropy and embracing those smaller donations on a more frequent basis and making it easy for them to make those donations can really set you up for success to kind of grow that ask over time and grow that relationship over time.
I think one thing you shared, Mackenzie, just about the social aspect, I feel like a lot of nonprofits are, when they talk about, oh, we're on social, we're on Facebook. And so for this audience in particular, they're not like on Facebook at all. So thinking about like, what is the strategy for Instagram, for YouTube, for TikTok, like those may, it seems like there was maybe more of an emphasis on trying to spread social strategy across those channels maybe 5-6 years ago, and it just wasn't monetizing, I think, because we were out ahead of this Gen Z really moving into the years where they can be more philanthropic. And so nonprofits maybe needing to revisit some of that strategy and think a little bit differently about how they're getting out in front of their audiences across social platforms and not just focused as heavily on Facebook.
I was going to say really quick as well, I think to Mackenzie's point of micro philanthropy, it is about meeting them where they are, right? And maybe instead of a really large, generalized and overproduced ask to end, world child hunger, right? One of my first really meaningful experiences in donating to some sort of cause was giving to a local mutual aid fund. And I knew that my smaller amount of money that I was donating was specifically going to help a local family like be able to afford rent for 1 or 2 more months. And so maybe it was $30. My $30 drop in that bucket the results felt so much more tangible than X organization is having a $100,000 match at calendar year end. And I don't feel like my drop in the bucket is going to be stretched that far. And I don't know exactly what's going to be done with that.
I think it all goes back to just quickly to add in like this idea of they want to know their impact of their donation. So if you're telling them, like you're saying, we want to raise $100,000, well, what is my $30 really going to do? What does that mean? Whereas like when you can tangibly tie that donation to an actual outcome, they connect to that story like we were talking about before. And then it's like they feel a need to give. There's almost like this fear of missing out, for lack of a better term.
Fantastic. Very quickly, I want to check back in on that poll. Again, we asked what is currently the biggest challenge for your nonprofit when it comes to connecting with Gen Z. 42% of you said difficulty in reaching Gen Z donors through traditional channels. 18% of you said competition with other causes and priorities for Gen Z donors. 15% said a lack of understanding of what motivates Gen Z donors to give. 14% said limited resources to create targeted fundraising campaigns for Gen Z. 12% said difficulty in engaging Gen Z donors beyond the initial gift, and 0% of you said actually it's going really well, no challenges. So I guess that's why we're here today. But we are in general across the boards. I think this is kind of, again, the point of the session, that there's all sorts of different ways that we can grow and improve in our connection with Gen Z donors. So thank you to those of you who filled it out. All right, Parker, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. How can our nonprofits effectively communicate their mission and impact to Gen Z donors?
I think number one, and it sounds like this is kind of what's trending in our poll that's happening, is just be where Gen Z is. To Alyssa's point, Gen Z is not on Facebook. They're on social media. They're on TikTok. They're on Twitter. They're on Instagram, but they're also kind of starting to fall off of Instagram a little bit. They're using YouTube. They're consuming tons of podcasts. I think my point about YouTube, there's also streaming platforms, right? And it doesn't have to be trying to get a 30-second spot on Hulu, but even YouTube Shorts, live streams on social media platforms, things like that. I think also, though, don't be afraid to be very strong in your belief statements, like we believe X kind of language, and be really consistent in that. I think one of the first things we talked about was just the need for value alignment amongst the Gen Z potential donors, right? And being able to clearly and quickly determine that, this foundation, they are aligned with this strong belief that I have, their values are very clearly laid out, that kind of thing. And then also, I think visibility, don't get so discouraged of a low conversion rate amongst younger donors. Throw it all out there. Throw it all out into the ether. They're all watching. We're all watching. Someone will see it. Even if it feels like you're not having as fast or as quickly of an ROI. It's really important to, I think one of Mackenzie's earlier points was, prior to Googling an organization, I may go look at social media, right? And I think it's important to even see that foundation or that organization is active on social media and appears like a living, breathing, dynamic entity. So increase your visibility and don't get discouraged if it's not feeling like it's churning in some new donors right away.
Really helpful. Thank you so much, Parker. Mackenzie, over to you. Any thoughts on effectively communicating mission and impact to Gen Z?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to that digital communication. I mean, as Alyssa noted, this is the digital native generation. They're accustomed to texting. They're accustomed to using social media to communicate their interests, connect with brands that they care about. And like I said before, they're kind of used to engaging in that two-way conversation with brands online. So I think without a strong online presence, it can be hard to connect with these donors and communicate your mission. Once you're on those channels, I think that Gen Z donors oftentimes do well with like bite-sized and visual content, right? So I think videos, I know Alyssa mentioned before, like they don't even have to be like super high quality produced. They can be user-generated content, short videos like that as well. I think that that's a really engaging way to communicate your story, distribute testimonials, everything of that nature. And so I think, yes, we hear this generation partly likes bite-sized content because they have shorter attention spans is one thing that I've heard a lot. But I also think that the reason that this is a good idea to do this is because we know that this generation is inundated with marketing messages and brand messages online. So the quicker you can convey your story, the quicker you can convey your message in that visual format, in that bite-sized format, I think the more likely they are to retain your message and really feel kind of connected to you as an organization. So prioritizing those ways to tell your nonprofit story online, kind of in digestible formats, I think is definitely key. And then in addition to that, I think that communicating your mission and impact also kind of requires you to show how your work is improving their community and making a better world, like in a bigger picture. They not only want to know like that their donation matters, they want to know that your work is important and is kind of creating like domino effects that ultimately like improve communities. And so I think devoting some time to talking about your impact as it relates to the bigger picture can definitely bring some benefits. And if you're looking for ways to do that, I even think things like using influencers to help with that, so that not everything is coming directly from you, but that there's some organic conversation reiterating kind of the value of your nonprofit and your work can help you along the way as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mackenzie. All right, Alyssa, over to you. Thoughts on effectively communicating with Gen Z?
Yeah, I would, Mackenzie and Parker covered I feel like a really great overview. I feel like the only other thing I would add is just as you think about some of your more traditional fundraising strategies, peer-to-peer, for example, there's opportunities to kind of pivot and think differently about that. So peer-to-peer events, run, walk, rides probably are not going to have the same appeal to Gen Z as they do to your older donors who have been around that type of fundraising strategy for a while. So instead, what does peer-to-peer look like in social, in digital? How can you find maybe some of your current Gen Z donors on your file who they don't have to be super popular, well-known celebrity influencers, but they can be ambassadors on your behalf and rally their followers and their community around something they're passionate about to give back. So what does it look like to do peer-to-peer fundraising types of challenges that can be maybe hyper-focused on a particular program or a passion area, like why that Gen Z donor connected to you in the first place? How can they rally their friends around supporting that cause? I think appeals to that that desire of Gen Z to like be aligned with values, but also be able to like share some fun new things with their friends on social and invite them into community with them. So I think that just thinking differently about how you can provide fundraising opportunities that aren't your typical direct mail appeal or just, click on this ad and make a gift. How are you maybe reinventing strategies that have worked well for you previously in a different space?
Great. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Very quickly, I want to mention we've had another poll go live. This time we've asked, what is your main way you communicate with, starting again. What is the main way your nonprofit currently communicates with Gen Z donors? If you want to fill that out now, I'll check back on that in a few minutes. But in the meantime, Alyssa, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What are some best practices for cultivating long-term relationships with Gen Z donors and keeping them engaged with the nonprofit's work?
I would say, obviously stewardship is key. Being able to report back on how that gift made an impact. I know most organizations are raising as much as they can unrestricted to help support programs at large, but you can still share back stories, snippets, impact statistics, like Mackenzie shared in bite-sized elements or chunks that are meaningful to communicate impact and display the way that gift is making a difference. So I think that's a key one. I think also identifying ways for Gen Z to be maybe an amplifier for your mission or your cause. So what are the ways that they can be involved beyond just making a gift? So, do they want to volunteer? Do they want to just share who you are and what you do through, reshares of your posts or stories? Do they want to be part of maybe a multi-generational board or some type of like steering committee, but make that sound fun for them. So those types of things that just like get them engaged beyond the fundraising element, I think is really what's going to bond them deeper to the organization. In the research that we've seen, their Generation Z right now is more likely to stay with you, to not change their giving behavior because of financial constraints than other generations. And they're not as limited by income like your boomers may be who are on fixed incomes. So how are you continuing to cultivate that, knowing it may be a while before you see significant gifts from them, but they're about to be inheriting the greatest transfer of wealth. And so how are we, building that relationship, I do think is really important. And communicating impact is really the key element there.
Definitely. Thank you, Alyssa. Mackenzie, over to you. How can we make sure we're building long-term relationships with our Gen Z donors?
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate what Alyssa just said, one of the first things to remember is that the oldest of this generation is like 26 and the youngest is 10. So that capacity and ability for this group to give financially is going to differ kind of greatly, but I think that that's okay, right? I think starting early is really the best case scenario. So encouraging this group to get involved with your nonprofit now by offering those multiple engagement opportunities that Alyssa mentioned is definitely key. She mentioned volunteerism. I definitely think that's a great way to reach these donors. They're often really willing to give their time, and as they volunteer, obviously they can become connected, and then down the road you can kind of make that financial ask again. I think even beyond that, you're going to have some 23 to 26-year-olds who might have a good capacity to give right now, and so don't be afraid to lean into that either, offering them really a way to give today and grow that ask over time. And plus, something that I think about too is that we know that many of those younger professionals who might have that capacity to give right now actually seek out work for like really socially responsible companies. So they're oftentimes eligible for things like matching gift or volunteer grant programs, or can help you secure some sort of corporate sponsorship. So offer them ways to get involved like that as well, and offer all of these ways for them to get involved beyond just a traditional donation, because we know that they often see their donation, whether it's a donation of time or a donation of money, as kind of reflective of their identity. So they may be eager to kind of get involved further and make sure that they're really making an impact. I think kind of the other way for helping this organization or this generation stay involved is by asking them to help you kind of be that amplifier, as Alyssa mentioned too. I think about even something like Facebook birthday fundraisers that we used to see. Those might live on Instagram now, right? So in lieu of kind of having someone send them a gift, they would ask their friends to donate to a cause of their choice. Can you mimic that experience now that you used before? Use that on Instagram or Snapchat or something like that to kind of get these donors eager to give and eager to help you kind of recruit new people for your cause. And so I think that's definitely something to keep in mind as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. All right, Parker, any thoughts on keeping long-term relationships with our Gen Z donors?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on the amplifier commentary from Alyssa and Mackenzie, giving them a way to engage and spread the word without having to commit to that financial donation. At a more specific level, in terms of keeping them engaged with maybe the content you're putting out as an organization, I would say really lean into in the field type storytelling. Over time, that's what I find myself the most drawn to in terms of checking back in on a foundation or an organization that I haven't given to in a while. Like leaning into that and making clear, again, the who behind this nonprofit. Something really common on TikTok specifically right now is brands are maybe looking at their social media team and designating one individual on that social team to sort of be the face of their account on TikTok or on Twitter or Instagram. And as a user or a potential donor is getting to know that person, right, who is sort of the face of that organization's storytelling, they're also then getting to know the organization, and they're coming back for more. They're re-engaging and checking back in on what stories are being told and what's happening again in the field, right, within the nonprofit's work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Parker. I have one final question that I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and then I'm officially opening this discussion to our audience questions. So I know we've had a number of questions come in, but it is not too late to continue to submit them. So if you have any lingering questions you want to make sure our panelists address, now would be a great time to get them in. But before we get to that, I do have my final question. Mackenzie, I'm going to have you start us off. How can nonprofits measure the success of their efforts to acquire and retain Gen Z donors, and what metrics should they be paying attention to?
Yeah, to circle back to something that kind of Parker mentioned before, we know that this generation is still pretty young, so you might not have that immediate boost in donations from adopting like a few of these strategies that can kind of better tailor to the needs of this generation. So I think I would kind of preface everything by saying that if you're willing to start small, I think you'll see that kind of as their disposable income grows, as their influence in the workplace grows, they'll also grow their donations. And so if they already have a strong connection to you, that's the first step. So remember that starting small might mean you only reach a couple of these donors at first, but you grow your connection with them so that you can ultimately, earn their trust and their support down the road. To understand kind of the success of your efforts, I think it can be helpful to, and I think I saw a question about this too, to solicit the feedback of these younger donors too. So once you acquire a few or reach a few, ask for their input and their insights to gauge the success and results of your efforts and to kind of identify those areas for improvement. In terms of like hard metrics, I guess, to pay attention to, I think looking at social media engagement can be pretty telling. So track engagement metrics like likes, shares, comments, and all of that, but also engage in social listening to see what these donors are kind of saying about you and your cause and track that sentiment over time. I think paying attention to your own internal kind of responsiveness to those messages online too can be really telling and can help you kind of fine tune your engagement moving forward. And then the other thing that I would mention is I know that there might be a question of how do I make this sustainable? So I think if you want to look at that acquisition cost, that can be a good number to kind of gauge over time as well. So you want to be sure that whatever you're investing in reaching these donors, you can then kind of recoup later down the road. So paying attention to that acquisition cost and trying to lower it over time by finding more effective low cost ways to meet these donors, such as through advocacy and things like that, I think can be really powerful.
Great. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Parker, over to you. Any thoughts on success, metrics? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, I think conversion in revenue is a really tough metric for determining your success as an organization with Gen Z. I would look at, like Mackenzie said, social media interactions. I would look at click-through rate, right? They may not be converting, but do you have returning site visitors? Do you have people who are regularly engaging with you and listening to you and looking at your content? Do you have campaigns that are going viral? Is there a certain month of the year where you consistently over the last few years, every year you kind of have a campaign going viral that month? Things like that. And I think also, to Mackenzie's point, the listening and the solicitation of how do you view our organization or our cause in your eyes? That's really important, I think.
Great. Thank you so much. Alyssa, any thoughts on determining success and any metrics we should be looking for?
Echo everything Mackenzie and Parker just shared. I do think as you're working on what your Gen Z strategy might entail, it is going to be, it's a investment acquisition strategy. So just as you might be investing in direct mail acquisition, that's going to be a loss because you're investing to acquire those donors. There's a payback period of probably 3 years. Think about it in that sense for focusing on Gen Z. You're going to be investing dollars up front to acquire probably a small number of donors, to Mackenzie's point, but then be tracking what that cost per dollar raised is. If you're doing acquisition of Gen Z across multiple channels, like is one channel higher or lower in that cost to raise $1? And then what does that payback period look like? If you're acquiring a Gen Z donor, does it take 2 years to pay back that initial investment, 3, 5? And those can start to be your benchmarks that you're measuring against to make sure that you're making progress year over year as you're refining your strategy. But it really is going to be, it's an investment in investing in this generation that should have a great reward down the line as you've cultivated those relationships, as you've built your brand awareness. You, to Mackenzie and Parker's point, may not have converted them right away, but they know who you are and they are engaged and they're curious about you and your story, so that when the time comes, they are ready to make that gift or make an even larger gift or make a monthly donation. So I think there is that longer term view you've got to take when measuring the success of these strategies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we are officially moving over to our audience questions, and our most upvoted audience question is, do you have any samples of appeals that have worked well with this Gen Z audience? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, so I'm going to ask if anyone wants to volunteer for this question. Anyone have any samples or examples or even ideas of something they're pretty sure would work for appeals for a Gen Z audience?
I'm trying to think of how this might apply to the masses. We work with an organization called Illumination. So it's a collective of Bible translation organizations. They have put a lot of investment. They're pulling resources from, I think, 11 or 12 nonprofit entities to invest in a much larger strategy to acquire monthly donors. And so they're partnering up with Christian music artists, speakers, to be able to present the opportunity to make a gift at a concert or at a conference. And the actual percentage of Gen Z and millennial donors acquired through these efforts, I mean, it's like 40% of a file that they're cultivating is Gen Z and millennial, mostly Gen Z. So they're going into the spaces where these donors are. It's certainly a heavy investment, but they've made a commitment and they're seeing incredible return through that kind of collective strategy and partnership to further the efforts around a particular cause or mission. So that could be one avenue. I think it does require us to think differently and outside of like the typical direct mail package to be able to really be wildly successful in acquiring and communicating with this audience. I think though, Parker, you shared with me a few examples of just like TikTok style videos. I think Houston SPCA, which is one of our clients, has done.
Yeah. To that point, and to what I said previously, I feel like that specific client, they do a fantastic job of constantly putting out content specifically on TikTok. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have one or two individuals who have kind of taken on that face of, here's my day at the shelter, or get ready with me to go and get a pet ready for adoption, things like that. And while the messaging right up front isn't necessarily this is what we've done with the money that we've gotten from donors, it sticks in your head, right? And so maybe you live in the Houston area and time comes to adopt a pet, and that's who's top of mind, right? And then a year or two later, then you have enough disposable income to actually make that donation. That's still who's top of mind. So I think things like that, they do a really good job of.
I was just going to say, I think that idea of like behind the scenes looks and stuff that you were just kind of talking about, I think that works really well because you're obviously instilling trust without, like you said, telling them explicitly, this is where your donation went. You're kind of showing that authenticity, that transparency. Mm-hmm. This is what a day looks like. This is actually like an average day. This is the work that we're doing. I think when you're able to emphasize that and show that in these unique ways on the platforms that Gen Z is using on a daily basis, I think that goes over well. So I think that's a great example that you just gave there, Parker.
Wonderful. Our time is racing by, so we're officially entering what I'm going to call our speed round, where I'm going to try to get through as many questions as we possibly can. Mackenzie, I'm going to have you start us off with this one. It's a question that was reflected both in an audience question and as well as a number of registration questions. How to connect Gen Z to a cause when either the cause itself is to help older people or your nonprofit is run primarily by older generations. How do we get Gen Z interested?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think if this is kind of a multi-pronged question that we have going on here, but I think that if you're, it's all about telling the story, no matter like what your organization does, it's about telling the story. So if you run a charity for older adults, can you show what your charity does to improve those older adults' lives? Can you tell a story of one individual, which I think is something that Parker mentioned before, because they can connect to one individual. They can see that as someone that they could possibly know. And then it allows them down the road to see the need for their donation and to really feel that it's tangible. And then I think that the other part of the question is if your nonprofit is run by older individuals. And I think soliciting the help of even one Gen Z donor, one member of Gen Z, and asking them to help you recruit other, get in front of other Gen Z audiences can be really powerful. And I think, it requires you to kind of embrace this change, embrace those digital channels, and adopt your approach and experiment. It's okay to fail at the beginning or not see that success immediately. You want to experiment over time. And if you can recruit one, then they can become your advocate. They can become that amplifier that Alyssa was talking about before.
Great. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Parker, a question for you. I'm going to paraphrase this question a little bit because, again, I'm combining it with a registration question to try to get as much bang for our buck. But what recognition does Gen Z appreciate, particularly if they're a monthly donor? What recognition can we give to kind of steward that relationship?
I think, that's a good one. I think it's also hand in hand, right? I think kind of making clear the impact that monthly donor recurring giving is. What is that doing versus maybe just a one-off gift? I wouldn't say that Gen Z so much needs a certificate of appreciation in their inbox, right? I think again, it goes back to really driving home the specifics of what that recurring gift is doing.
Yeah, I think sometimes in absence of having that really strong case for support or value proposition for making a monthly gift, we might you get a newsletter and you get a tote bag and you get a pin for being a monthly donor. And Gen Z probably could care less about those things. And the premiums or special gifts that might come along with being a monthly donor. And instead just want I think that feed of story and impact, a reminder that their gift is that choice they made to make a gift and sacrifice that amount each month is making an impact, not that they're giving to get something, that they're giving to feel something, I think, more than to get something in return.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Alyssa, follow-up question for you. I saw that you touched on this in the chat, but I'd love to give you a space to talk about it now. Someone submitted the question, I work in higher ed and we have been told we can't have TikTok. Any suggestions for what we can do instead? And I'm going to combine that with just in general, how to select a marketing channel, picking one, picking multiple for your organization.
Yeah. So I'd probably say social would be the ideal marketing channel because that is where, to Parker's earlier point, what did you say? Chronically online.
Chronically online.
Okay, yes. So that's where they are all day, every day, most of the time. And so engaging in that channel, you're going to get, I feel the widest reach at probably the lowest cost. If you're not able to be on TikTok, I think thinking about how you can kind of replicate that experience on Instagram, more specifically with Reels. So what are those short loop stories, quick video things that you can capture? They don't have to be long. They're definitely short, but they're memorable. To Parker's point earlier, it could be he was sharing a particular person or staff member you have. And it doesn't have to be someone young. I think it was the National Parks Association had a very old man doing the Twitter updates, and they were hilarious because it's someone who clearly does not know Twitter tweeting out and signing off, every tweet with his name, he's signing a letter. And it's endearing. And so even, what is that brand? If you are older, it doesn't mean you have to pretend to be young to, align with that audience. So it's social, and then thinking about Reels on Instagram.
I was going to say once more, YouTube Shorts. My 14-year-old nephews spend all day long on YouTube Shorts, partially because they're not allowed to have TikTok yet, right? So I think that's an up and coming platform
great
or
point.
yeah.
I did not know. Mackenzie.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention too that along with using Instagram and like TikTok type videos, I think that like Instagram stories and like Snapchat stories and stuff like that expires as well too, because a lot of people like actually might go on Instagram and only watch those because they know they're about to expire. So I think incorporating that type of engagement as well, that's short form, short lived, can be really powerful.
Definitely. I was just going to quickly say, Parker, I had no idea YouTube Shorts were so big with the younger Gen Z. So that's so interesting to learn.
I didn't either until recently. I was blown away.
Very interesting. All right. Unfortunately, I have to have us start wrapping up. The hour is almost upon us. So I want to ask one final question of each of our panelists to make sure we get some parting words. I'm going to admit it's a kind of big and broad question, but one I'm excited to hear from you all about. And Parker, I'll have you start us off. What do you see as the future of fundraising with younger generations, particularly in mind? How can our nonprofits get ahead today and prepare for the generations after Gen Z?
I think it's got to be all about relational, personable, and very specific storytelling. In terms of challenges or recurring campaigns, I think even things like regional challenges, how many individuals from X state or Y city can give in this amount of time, and then showing that to the people who might potentially make a donation. Adding a visual to like compounding those donations, like how are you real? Again, it's that what can your small drop in maybe a smaller bucket do compared to a smaller drop in a huge bucket? I think text to give and SMS campaigns are absolutely on fire right now. I think the data I think we're still in very early stages in terms of being able to see industry trends and industry standards around text to give and SMS campaigns, but I think they're definitely here to stay. And then we've said this probably 50 times already, but don't just ask for funds. Continue to ask for engagement, ask for amplification. Can you boost a post? Can you circulate this? Can you kind of carry on this story yourself as also a person able to make a difference who might not be able to make a donation?
Thank you, Parker. Alyssa, over to you. Thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead and keep our eye out on those future generations?
Yeah, I think I really echo Parker's comments around like the story. So being able to continue to refine your story and your offer is going to be critical regardless of the generation that you're speaking to. Acquisition of new donors is becoming more and more challenging with each year. And so having that unique value proposition that those, quick bites or sound bites and that are consistent, that communicate why someone should give to you and not another organization, why they should give to you now, today, instead of tomorrow. Those things are really important to continue to drive the actual action of giving. Beyond that, it's really just it'll be a continual evolution of the channels that we use. But it's been, years now that people have said direct mail's dead. It's not dead yet. Digital is here. It's just evolving and changing in terms of the platforms we might use. So I think there's like inherently consistent themes and strategy. It's maybe the execution just looks a little bit different. And so I would just encourage people to not be daunted by communicating to new generations or scared of it. It's really just using all of that great knowledge and industry insights we have and maybe just applying it in a different way.
Fantastic. All right, over to you, Mackenzie. Thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, I would just again highlight that what Parker and Alyssa said, that storytelling piece is really key. And I think if that's like one takeaway you have from today, that's probably a good one to have. I would also say too, as kind of like an encouraging point that, we know this generation is used to this idea of loyalty. They're used to being loyal to brands, which means that they might become loyal to your nonprofit too. So getting involved with them today and connecting with them early so that you can kind of become ingrained in their identity, I think will be really powerful to your ongoing success. You want to kind of build that loyalty from a young age so that giving becomes kind kind of this no-brainer for them later on. I think that always preparing for future generations is going to require us to kind of take a proactive approach, monitor their giving behaviors early on, their likes, their dislikes, experiment with these new tactics in response that we hope will resonate with them. And I think in order for you to ensure that that innovation and experimentation is happening, it will require you to kind of foster a culture of learning at your organization. And remember that, with that experimentation might come missteps. Not every tactic or strategy you employ to reach young donors will be a winner, and that's okay. Using that and ensuring that your team feels empowered to try those new things and to learn from those new tactics is really important. So use that kind of input to inform your strategy moving forward. Always just be looking out for evolving giving behaviors and trying new things to connect with donors, and then use that input to formulate the best approach to move forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. With that, we've reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists. I know if we were in an in-person setting, there would be a round of applause. So just know that I'm sending that to you emotionally through the screen today. I do also want to give a big thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for taking a time out of your day. I hope you learned something that you can take with you to support the already amazing work you're doing. We are rooting for you. You've got this. We are just trying to help you achieve those goals. We do have a packed spring and summer of panels ahead of us. So please keep your eye out on the NXUnite website, the NXUnite LinkedIn, and you can even find me on LinkedIn to keep up to date on everything that's happening. We have panels on engagement strategies, donor recognition, and more. So keep your eye out for anything that might be relevant to your team. I do want to give one final thank you to Double the Donation for sponsoring today's panel. Thank you for your support of this free educational content. And with that, thank you all. I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I will say goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.